support.
You have to always travel with the squad. It's what I should have done too. So, I think I actually want to start very specific with one thing because I just got an email this morning that had your playbook in it. So can you maybe give us like a really quick spiel of what the playbook is and sort of what it was meant to achieve? Because I want to get at one question that was in there.
Sure. Shireen's referring to, we published a marketing leadership playbook this morning. And I think when you step back and you say, what's the future of agencies, which is a conversation we always have, we always take a look and step back and say, well, our job is to be an agent for marketers. And marketers are trying to grow their business. How are they going to grow their business? They're going to connect with their customers. So when we look at this, the whole industry has to move forward in order for us to have a chance to be successful at what we're doing. And we think that the transformation from being a TV-led era to a digitally led era is one of those things that hasn't quite happened yet. It's like, how many of you play Jenga? You know that brick game? You pull the blocks out? Well, I feel like what's happened over the last 15 years is with the digital, we've taken one block out at a time, but the marketing infrastructure is still built around TV. The way we go about organizing, the way we budget, the way we measure success, the way our vendors are organized, the way marketing departments are organized. And so this is about to really fundamentally change. And if we as an industry, this includes marketers, technology vendors, agencies, don't restructure the way we're approaching things, the disconnect between what we do and what consumers are doing is going to grow. And if that happens, then we're all out of business. So the purpose of the playbook is to help put some thought pieces together to facilitate a conversation so we all can move forward.
So there was one particular thing in there, it was in the introduction that you wrote, and it talked basically about internal structures and how structuring for that success has to happen just as much internally within the agency partner so that then the agency partner can go and help ultimately the client also then structure for success. Can you talk about how 360i's kind of organized itself internally sort of for that digitally led? Because you guys are in a very unique place, right?
Yeah.
Your history.
Yes, and I mean ultimately we have to organize how we organize our company and how we organize for each client are two different things. So ultimately we're in business to service our clients, and so what we have built our company around a series of deep specializations that we can put together in different mixes based on the client assignment. If the client, though, is organized in silos, like there's somebody who's in charge of search, there's somebody in charge of paid social, there's somebody in charge of mobile, unfortunately what will often happen is we then have to organize our teams to mirror the internal clients, and then you get disconnected work. And so we have to work that much harder to try and overcome that. So this is a great example. What we're hoping is if everybody can relook at the way we need to be successful, because of course consumers don't think of themselves that way. And so we need to think of ourselves as an interconnected ecosystem. And as an agency, we need the ability to be able to put together these specializations in an integrated bundle that actually works. It's not a series of tactics.
So then when you're kind of talking about organizing for success in a digital space, sort of the talent portion comes in pretty early on, right? That's the discussion I'm sure you guys are having pretty early on. Tell me about sort of what the whole thing is when we talk about talent retention and recruitment and where the difficulty lies. Where have you found that the difficulty lies at 360i, and then what you're observing in the industry at large?
Well, I think in general there's just not enough trained talent, right? Okay. So you have a supply-demand problem here where you have digital has come upon us so quickly. And when you had the dot-com 1.0 implosion, which I was part of in 2001, people left the industry and then people didn't join. And so there was that period of time between sort of 2000 and 2005 where this was not a ripe industry. People were not flooding in. And then a lot of people who were in the late 90s when everything got super hot left. And so you have a dearth of talent that kind of is in between that 5-year period. And then you have this, obviously, explosion. You guys are all here. We all read Digiday and others, and we're all trying to get up to speed, but there's not enough talent to be able to handle this. And there's too much talent that's been trained in the old ways. So we have a supply-demand problem. That's the overall industry issue. I think the issue in terms of retention and things of that nature is, one, there's too much demand, but also we have to look inside ourselves and say, are we affording our employees the career opportunities that they need so they are actually better off inside the company than jumping? And I think there's certainly theoretically, agencies should be spectacularly good places for that, because one of the things, and this is not talked about nearly enough, is if you have lots of interesting clients and lots of industries, and you're doing lots of things, then without having to leave a company, you can reinvent yourself as an employee. You can learn lots of different things. You can learn lots of industries. That's certainly what I love the most. I mean, you can learn packaged goods and auto and spirits, and we don't talk about that enough. So that's the theory. Then there's the execution. Even to those who do talk about it, I think there are too few companies in the industry that actually focus on actively rotating their people and having this type of candid conversation. And it starts with, I mean, one of the things that we've started from the beginning, and listen, there's always room for improvement for us, is having an honest conversation twice a year where the employee lists, this is what I want to do for the next 6 months, in 6 months, this is where I want to be in 2 years. And you have an open and candid conversation of, okay, here's where you are now, here's where you want to be. How can I help you get there? And how can we align our interests with the client's interests with what you want to do? And we found when we do that, people stay longer. When we're unsuccessful in doing that, they leave sooner.
Excuse me. So one of the things, because when you're talking about, giving people that path, I think when we were in the town hall earlier, we were talking actually exactly about that, how important it is and how many times agencies don't do that, give people the path. And I think a couple people brought up the point, well, sometimes you give them the path and sometimes they're shooting for the moon. They're like, in 2 years, I want to be a director that's in charge of everything. And sometimes it's not possible. Do you think as an industry, we run the risk of giving people too much too quickly because the agencies are scared that they might leave?
I don't think it's just agencies. I think in general there's a risk of that. I think that brings the second leg of the stool in talent is training. Right. And I think one of the challenges we have is how do you invest enough in training and while still being able to pay the bills? I think that's one of the challenges with everything that's happening with cost cutting and procurement on fees is, how can you have enough managerial time so that you can coach these people, right? And I think if you look at most agencies, everything is about lower your overhead and have the most amount of billable time. Well, a manager or coach is part of that overhead. Training is part of that overhead. So one of the things you really have to look at is how do you invest in training in really cost-effective ways. But I think it's absolutely essential to do that, especially for new manager training. I mean, the number one reason people leave companies, certainly the number one reason people leave 360i is not money. It's because they feel like their manager's not looking out for them and where they're going. Okay. And so when you take somebody who might be 23 or 24, then you promote them and they're managing 2 people for the first time, that's a level of training. And then if they get promoted again, all of a sudden they have 10 people in their department. That's a new job. They need to be trained on how to handle that type of management responsibility. Is
it a question of time too? Because I do feel like there's so much happening inside agencies that a lot of times that takes so much investment, training a person to be a manager. That falls by the wayside.
Absolutely, but I don't know what the alternative is. And I think and it's a partnership. So everybody has to understand an investment means you are putting in additional time beyond what you would ordinarily do. It's not taking away from something. And so I think it's really important that people own their own careers. I always thought of my career as a stock. I want to build equity value over the long term. I wasn't so worried about this 6 months or this year in terms of compensation. It was how am I getting skills and experiences and meeting people that was going to benefit me over the long term, that was going to put me in a position to be able to run a much larger operation of some kind.
Huh. Who's your first manager? What was he or she like?
She was very sweet.
Was there anything? Oh, that's a sensitive question. I thought you were just getting. I expected you to.
No, people ask me all the time because we do these things at 360i called anniversary lunches, where it's just an excuse for me to get under 10 people out, and I think we've done over 300. I've had lunch with over 300 employees in the last year, and it's a roundtable. They just ask questions. I always get this mentor question: "Tell me about your mentors." And I would say one of the real unfortunate things in my career is I did not have before starting this a positive mentor experience. Almost everything I learned about management was the George Costanza model, which was do the opposite of what I saw happen and take place. And so it was really about no one put their arm around me ever and sort of said, this is the path and this is where you need to go. I had to figure it out amongst myself. Now I was the third of 3 kids, and my parents were kind of done with parenting at that point, so that was good training ground for that. But it was really, and I feel the same way I feel with sort of parenting is like, that makes me more want to be a mentor and make sure we have a mentorship system, and that makes me more excited about providing coaching, because I know that would have saved me a tremendous amount of mistakes over the last 20 years if I had better mentors.
Absolutely. I want to switch topics because we don't have a lot of time, and I did want to talk to you sort of about figuring out, this shop of the future business, this kind of theme of the whole conference. And I've, just been talking to attendees leading up to today, just over the last week, and a few things came up over and over again. One of the big things was trust. Sort of, there seems to be a feeling that there's a trust deficit. The clients are trusting their agencies less than ever. I'm wondering if you are feeling that, and why do you think that's happening?
I think there is a general suspicion out there. I think one of the reasons we've been successful is because we've been able to overcome that. But I think one of the things that a lot of people in the business have failed to recognize is an agency is derived from the term agent, which means that we're supposed to be acting a fiduciary duty on our client's best interests. And when we have things like trading desks where we're taking inventory risks and arbitraging, we're no longer an agent. Now, that's not inherently bad.
Right.
It's just you're blending. You cannot say I'm your agency and be doing that. By definition, those are the kinds of things that cause trust issues. I think ultimately, I'm extremely bullish on this business. When we started this venture in 2004, everybody was like, I don't know what you're doing. Agencies are going to go away. Google's going to disintermediate you. There's going to be technology. Then we raised money in 2007. All the private equity guys said it's a terrible business. You're going to get disintermediated. And that's been the theme that's been the whole time. As long as there is complexity, marketers will need partners that can help them navigate that complexity. The question is, of the agencies that are in the business, how many of them are constructed to actually do that in this digitally led world and actually bring value and help be a Sherpa for marketers? And if we're not helping lead marketers, if they don't trust us, then we're finished. So I think that's the real challenge, is how many of the agencies that are structured for success, and do we have the business models that actually make us trusted advisors?
Counterpoint, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, as somebody who doesn't work in an agency. If clients continue to drive down fees and agencies can't support themselves, then how long should they have to be trusted advisors? Can the future agency not look like an agent? Is that a possibility, or is that?
No, I think you absolutely can. I think you just have to be disclosed. I think like with everything, candor and transparency in what you're doing and why you're doing it is paramount. So there needs to be open and honest conversation. I think what's happened is procurement has driven fees down and driven some of these agencies by survival instincts, to do this. I also believe that some marketers knew what was going on, and they knew, and that was fine, because it was really, they wanted the right number of people on their business.
Right.
And if the only way that they could afford that was to have agencies have some of these business models, they were okay as long as they were hitting their ROI. And ultimately, there should be nothing wrong with that. I think if the client is achieving their goals, then there's no reason why their partners shouldn't make money. In fact, if the partners aren't making money, then that's not a long-term sustainable relationship.
Yeah. How about the consultancies stuff that I was talking about? New competitors, new places those clients can go that can act as agents for them. Viable threat, something that are they only good at one thing? Can they not ever replace traditional, agencies?
Fortunately, I'm not the head of the 4As. I don't have to worry about the whole industry. I think
as the head of 360i.
I think everybody's competitive, but we don't really focus on competitors. What we do focus, and we're very concerned about, is do we have innovative ways to help brands connect with customers in both rational and emotional ways that are going to help them monetize them, and they're going to help them create meaningful relationships. And that's our biggest concern. And whether it's ad blocking or it's any of these other things out there, those are the things that we spend most of our time figuring out how to innovate. And if we can be successful at helping our clients achieve their goals, there's more than enough business out there for everybody. And so I think focusing too much on competitors is a distraction. I think there's enough business for everybody who can actually add value. I think the challenge is there are too few people in the business that are adding enough value to justify their existence.
You mentioned ad blockers, and I'm glad you did because we don't have a lot of time, but I did want to talk to you about that.
Sure.
Sort of what's the current state of ad blockers from an agency perspective? Because I think we have been hearing very heavily from the publisher perspective, because obviously those are people being affected first. What are you hearing? How worried are clients? How worried are the brands? How worried are you?
Well, I think from the publisher perspective, I'd say the chickens have come home to roost. This is a outbreak of kind of a fallout from too much pixeling, too much data, too many ads on the page, not enough reliance on the user experience. I mean, what I'm saying is nothing new. Everybody's writing about it. I don't think this is, I think when we start saying we need better creative, I think that's a red herring. Do we need better creative in the industry? Absolutely. But that would have nothing to do with ad blocking, because that presumes that consumers are looking an ad at a time and saying, I don't want this, I do want this. We've gotten to a point where they're just fed up with slow loads. They're fed up with too many things blinking in front of them, and we have to solve that problem and find ways that if people are going to consume content with ads, that there's a value exchange. And I think ultimately the publishers, like Washington Post is trying this, publishers that can justify, hey, if you want to read my content, if you want to consume my video, you have to see ads, are going to be the ones who survive, and the ones that don't are not.
Yeah. The Washington Post is not that polite, though. I mean, the last time I went up there with an ad block on, I was literally like, "Don't be a dick." I was like, "Okay, Washington Post, I won't." It was very scary. Bryan, we have time for one question from the audience.
Sure.
There is one. Running out of time. Anybody got a question for Bryan? No. Oh, right here.
How you doing? Billy Kramer, Paper G. Just I guess I want you to expand upon your statement that you just made about creative and that it's a red herring. Isn't one of the problems that ad blockers are out there is because of the interruptive ads that are taking over creative? Wouldn't it be a better solution to have more focused and targeted creative? Wouldn't that have an impact on the user experience itself? And maybe they're less likely to want an ad blocker rather than the screaming at people with bullet holes shooting all over your page, interrupting your content?
Yes, but I think it's the creative ad unit that's the problem, not the creative that is in the ad unit. I don't think, no matter what you would put in something that's screaming at your face and blinking, I don't think that the consumer would be okay with that. I think it's very clear you need to have value exchange. I mean, Hulu's done a good job at that from the beginning, which is if you want to watch this programming, you have to see these number of ads. What Hulu hasn't done a good job is they show the same Ford ad 50 times, but that's a publisher. See, I think that's a publisher issue. That's not Ford's problem, although Ford should rotate a few more ads as well. But I think principally that's a publisher issue in terms of just bombarding people. Do I think we need better creative in the ad industry? Absolutely. So I'm not absolving agencies of that, but I just think that has nothing to do with the ad blocking problem. The ad blocking problem is about faster page load, fewer ads, fewer annoying ads, and when you are receiving an ad, you actually are okay with it. Maybe you're not okay with the ad, but you're okay that you're receiving a value exchange and you're dealing with it.
Right. Bryan, thank you so much. I know
thank
you're
you.
going to be around and people want to grab you later, so
Yeah.
feel free. Thank you.
Thank you.